All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're unpacking a really deeply structured and honestly, utterly fascinating philosophical framework from the writings of Xue in this explainer. It's called the Nature Array, and it's part of the 36 Bagua arrays. If you're the kind of person who loves peeling back the layers of reality to see exactly how everything connects, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to explore how this source text defines our universe, our individual habits, and ultimately, the actual mechanics of spiritual transcendence. So, let's get into it.
Right off the bat, the source text grounds us with this thought. Humans live in nature just as fish live in water. It's a beautiful, kind of meditative premise, isn't it? The idea here is that we originate from nature, we live in it, and eventually we return to it. We literally cannot exist without it, any more than a fish could survive on dry land. We can transcend a whole lot of things in our lives, but we can never actually transcend nature itself. It is our absolute, inescapable bond with the universe.
So here's how we're going to peel this onion today. First, the array of nature. Then, the three natures. Third, applying the framework. Fourth, escaping the array. And finally, yin, yang, and balance.
Okay, part 1. The array of nature.
Before we can really grasp this whole system, we've got to understand how the text actually defines the word nature. Because, spoiler alert, it's not just about trees and mountains. The text makes this direct, wild equation. Nature is the Buddha. Living in nature is living in the Buddha. It asserts that to become a Buddha, you have to live fully in nature. In this framework, nature isn't just biology, it's the absolute fundamental structural characteristic of reality itself.
So mechanically, how does this actually play out? Well, the source argues that structure determines the essence of a thing, and the nature manifests as the characteristics of that structure. Literally everything, mountains, water, flowers, medicines, animals, humans, even gods, has a specific nature. And because all these things possess their specific natures, they exist in limited, defined environments. Now, when you put all of those specific, limited, structured things together into one big picture, you get a splendid, highly organized, interconnected matrix. The text calls this whole shebang the nature array.
Which leads us nicely into part 2, the three natures.
You're probably wondering, how on earth is this massive matrix organized? Well, the text argues that this overarching nature is actually split into 3 distinct hierarchical tiers. The top tier is innate nature. This is the highest level. It refers to the essential attributes given by the Creator, and it is shared universally by all things of a certain type. The text describes this as a state of emptiness and elegance without form. And basically, it's the pure nature of the Tao. It's the absolute fundamental commonality that unites everything at the base level.
Taking one step down from that, we hit bestowed nature. If innate nature is the glue that unites us, bestowed nature is what categorizes us. These are the distinct characteristics given to different groups just to differentiate them. The text aligns this with the concept of Tai Chi, the force of differentiation. It represents a state of virtue that belongs to respective categories rather than the universal whole.
And finally, zooming all the way into the most granular level, we've got acquired nature. This is all about the highly individualized traits and habits formed by a single entity's specific environment and its daily needs for survival. It belongs to the individual and the individual alone. The text tightly links this acquired nature to human rationality and adaptation. Things like benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, trust. According to this framework, those actually aren't universal traits at all. They are just the results of your acquired nature, adapted to help you personally survive.
All right, part 3, applying the framework.
I know. These 3 natures sound incredibly abstract, but the text uses some brilliant analogies to make it super easy to grasp, zooming in from the universal down to the specific. Let's take water. The innate nature is the essence of water itself, shared by every single drop on Earth. But bestowed nature categorizes it. You have seawater, river water, spring water. Then acquired nature gets hyperspecific to its environment, a cup of tea, a teardrop, medicinal water. Or look at flowers. The innate commonality of all flowers zooms in to bestowed categories, like the daisy family or the lily family. And finally, the acquired nature is that hyperspecific individual chrysanthemum currently trying to survive in a pot on your porch. For humans, our innate nature is our shared common humanity. Our bestowed nature, according to the text, includes categorical differences like different races. And our acquired nature? That is your totally unique individual personality. You can see the satisfying logic here, right? We all possess all 3 of these layers simultaneously.
Moving on to part 4, escaping the nature array.
Here's the kicker. We're all locked into this 3-tiered matrix, which brings us to the real philosophical climax of the text. How do we get out? If we are entirely bound by our individual habits and our categories, how do we ever achieve spiritual transcendence? To understand the escape route, we have to contrast our current state with our ultimate goal state. On one hand, we have our acquired nature. This is where we live daily, full of habit, adaptation, reason, and social virtues like benevolence and propriety. On the other hand, we have our innate nature, that state of emptiness, formlessness, and the Tao. And the source's absolutely surprising argument here is that spiritual transcendence requires us to abandon our rational virtues. Yep, to get to that formless emptiness, we actually have to let go of the acquired habits.
The text actually lays out a literal, step-by-step progression for this escape. Basically, you have to work backwards. Step 1, overcome those acquired habits and individual rationalities. Step 2, discard your bestowed characteristics, meaning surpass the categories and virtues that divide us. Step 3, by doing those first two, you restore your innate nature. In other words, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion until only the universal, formless essence of the Tao remains. Only then have you truly escaped the array.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 5, Yin, Yang, and Balance.
Now we're diving into what is probably the most provocative aspect of the source text, its take on sexual love and spiritual harmony. According to the text, sexual love is classified specifically as a bestowed nature. Remember, bestowed nature is all about those categories created by the differentiating force of Tai Chi. Tai Chi divides humans into male and female, yin and yang. But if the goal is to work backward to our innate nature, we obviously must transcend this division. The text argues that transcending this yin and yang divide is what allows a person to achieve self-harmony. And this self-harmony? It's equated directly with the state of Buddhahood, or becoming a super celestial being.
This brings us to a core philosophical principle right from the text. All things carry yin, yet embrace yang. Because of the whole Tai Chi concept, these two forces exist, and finding balance between them is absolutely critical for the spiritual journey. But how exactly does the text say we find this balance in order to transcend it? Well, this is where the framework presents a truly fascinating mechanism.
Unlike typical ascetic traditions that demand strict celibacy, this text argues you absolutely cannot just ignore the bestowed nature of sex. The steps it lays out are super clear. Step 1, engage with nature through sex. Step 2, through this engagement, achieve yin and yang balance and saturation. If yin or yang is lacking, the text warns, there's going to be an imbalance, making transcendence incredibly difficult. Step 3, once that saturation is achieved, you can finally return to the sea of nature, the innate nature, the nature of the Tao. So the path to returning to nature is, ironically, through fully experiencing it.
And that leads us right to the ultimate paradox presented by Shufeng's framework. The text explicitly states, do not avoid sex. The more you avoid sex, the further you move away from innate nature, Buddhahood. Which leaves us with this final, massive question to ponder. If avoiding our bestowed instincts actually moves us away from enlightenment, is true spiritual transcendence found by escaping human nature, or by fully, completely embracing it until it's saturated and balanced? It's a remarkable framework that just completely flips traditional asceticism on its head, urging us to find the universal Tao by stepping fully into the nature we were given. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer of Shufeng's work, and I really hope this deep dive has given you plenty to think about today.